Kyle. That is Laura. This is He Said, She Said. Laura, how's it going?
Excellently.
So, we're going to jump right into it. And the topic tonight we're going to talk about is uh, interesting in the fact that there's probably no consensus on how best to do this. So, here's the deal. You've met someone, you're a single parent, all right, so let's get that out of the way. You've met someone, you think that there's opportunity there. So now here comes the big to do. You're going to have to introduce that person to your kids. So there's a couple of things that you got to factor in, right? So let's take a look at first. Chances are the kids are going to react unexpectedly. Secondly, they may act unexpectedly, right? So it's really like walking a fine line because you got to think to yourself, when am I going to do it? How long should we be together? I mean, it is loaded with.
I wasn't very good at this aspect of things.
Okay.
I'll admit that. I'll admit that right out there. It took me a very long time to even contemplate the notion of introducing someone kind of officially to my kids. I chose for a long time, I didn't introduce them to many people, but there was a long time that I just talked about, there being lots of new friends in my life, different kinds of friends, and they didn't really know anyone that I was dating because there was no one that I felt was going to be someone that I wanted to integrate into our world. So when I first felt that I was ready to integrate, that's when that was Drew, and that's when I thought about doing it. And I don't even remember the first time.
It was only 4 years ago.
It was 5 years ago, and I think if I recall this as being the first time that I did it, I think I probably broke every rule, but I think I just had him over for dinner.
Okay. So let me back up for just a moment so we can put some things in context. So how old were your boys approximately at the time? You don't have to be
11, 10,
precise.
10, 11, and 13.
Okay, so they were tweens, pretty much, right? You and Drew had
Yeah,
been
they were
going.
20.
You and Drew had been going out for how long before he came over for dinner, roughly?
I'd say roughly maybe 6 months.
6 months. Okay, so you did. You certainly carried it out for a while then. Did now he has children, right?
He has kids. His kids are older
Okay, so
than my
they
kids.
were not in the mix then at this point.
Not
It was
really.
not a situation where his kids. So this was just Drew and the kids. How did you prep the boys before Drew came over? Did you? Did you like give him like a week's heads up, prepare? What'd you do?
Yeah, I always have given my kids lots of preparation and very clear what they can expect. I never want them to feel like they don't know that something's going to pop out of the door at them as some kind of surprise. So I think I just told them that he was going to come over for dinner. Would that be okay for them? That I thought that would be a nice thing. I was careful always, even just saying it just now, about asking them for permission. I didn't really ever ask my kids for permission for things.
Right.
But, they heard me refer to him. They knew I was going out with him. And I think there might have even been a part of them that was like, oh, thank God, finally, there's like someone. I think that there was, because I didn't really bring them into my dating world for a long time. And I think my oldest son was starting to think like, does she date? Does anyone like her?
When you think about this topic, for me, I think there's actually two questions you have to ask. Okay. The first one is when. And I can tell you right now, the vast majority, from my humble opinion, blow that entirely. All right. They meet someone, they like them, sparks fly, it's rainbows and butterflies. And I think they know that it's hanging out there, and it's like, well,
Right.
if I can just go ahead and just deal with this as quickly as possible and she won't run off or he won't run off, then I'll know. So they force that issue, and then the relationship goes to hell. And so it's just a reoccurring theme, right? And then all of a sudden it's the daddy who's got the revolving door of girls coming through their house or apartment. And we can talk about where that leads. So the first question is how long? Me and the queen waited for 3 months, 90 days. All right. I have a theory on the 90-day thing. All right.
Okay.
The theory on it is this: most people, most can't keep up a charade for more than 90 days. Eventually, the real person is going to come out. They're going to do something stupid. She's going to go through a couple of cycles. She's going to, he's going to lose his mind or do something just that goes off the deep end. You can only keep up, a charade for so long, and eventually the real person comes out. I judge that to be about 90 days. So I think it's got to be brief. I think the first meeting, it's got to be brief. Now, in your case, your kids were older. Maybe you can do that full dinner thing. In my case, I got young kids, hers. I think it has to be brief. And I mean brief, like 20 minutes brief. Like, I'll tell you, the first time that me and the queen met each other's kids, we were walking out of our church together, going to our cars. That was the first meeting. 15 minutes tops, right? I mean, that's it. Just an exchange of names, an exchange of faces, and that's where it went. So the first one, I think it has to be brief. I think it has to be public. All right? My theory on it is you keep it public. The idea behind that, at least from my perspective, is if you keep it public, first off, people are going to be usually on their best behavior in public anyway. My son's not going to throw his underwear or put them on his head or something along those lines. So it's going to be public, and that kind of also forces the brevity, right? So, don't go camping or go on a weekend vacation the first time. Right? I think it has to be prepared and easy. Your point. You had talked with your sons prior to the dinner, right? They had an idea. It shouldn't be one of those situations where you jump in the car and say, oh, by the way, we're going to go over to John, my new boyfriend's, for dinner tonight. And so they have no clue what's going on. They're totally freaked out. My idea is that if you're thinking about taking that, give your kids, especially the older kids, give them some runway. Give them some time to think about it. Listen, your boys knew you were dating someone named Drew. Obviously, they knew he was more than just a friend. All right, there was some level of importance there. Listen, we're going to have Drew for dinner. I just want to let you know what's going on ahead of time. I'm sure you had these conversations. He wants to meet you, yada, 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 instead of just springing it on him at the last minute. I think that the way that we as single parents handle the first meeting can help us, or it can totally screw things up.
Oh, I agree.
I mean, we can do it wrong, and it can just be a disaster from then on, because kids will ruin a relationship. Let there be no doubt about that. So I think that if you can ease your kids in the first meeting, they feel prepared. They have more of a tendency to like the other person, and who knows what a 9 or 10-year-old kid's going to do thinking about meeting mom's new boyfriend, right? So that's my 3-step process, right? Brief, public, prepare. I think if you do those 3 things,
that I
think you
always
win.
hear is I had it, and I think one of the reasons why we could wait 6 months, or that we did wait 6 months, was that I had a lot of time without my kids to spend with Drew.
Right.
Right. Not everybody has that.
Right.
I recognize that is not the case with everyone. I have half a week. So I spent lots of time with Drew, and then when I didn't, when I had my kids, I didn't really have to see him. So there was no gee, I really want to see you, and in order to be able to see you, because I have my kids every single night, I need to move this process along. So I do think that people, individuals, single parents that don't have a lot of breaks, that have almost
None.
sole
Right.
custody. I think that's harder. I think it can be more difficult. So I'm not sure how one resolves that, but I do think it can be more difficult.
We were in the same situation, right? So we had lots of free time without the kids, so it clearly made it easier.
Right.
For the single parent that's got their kids all the time, I get it. I get that challenge because it is always out there, right? It's
Yeah.
just always something that you got to cope with. I don't necessarily know, however, if that impacts or would affect like whatever boundaries that you set with that, right? Because you got to have some boundaries. I mean, you
Oh,
can't go out
definitely.
with the guy the very first time and introduce him to your 12-year-old son the next day. You
Right.
that doesn't end well for you. So you got to have some boundaries. Now those boundaries you may go, okay, you know what, 30 days or it's going to be 4 months or I'm
Right.
going to, whatever. Maybe I can't get a babysitter, so maybe I have to have them over. Well, maybe you have them over for lunch instead of having
Right.
them over for dinner or something.
Right.
Just got to use common sense because you clearly don't have to introduce the person. Well, this is Daddy's new girlfriend. This is Daddy's new friend, and she just keeps on hanging around. She keeps coming back and back.
I did talk quite a bit with the kids about the concept of dating and what that means and what that looks like. Because all they want to know is, am I going to get a step parent, and am I going to have another house, and what it starts if they're young. It leads to all kinds of questions that we think we know, but we don't know what they're thinking. They're crazy little creatures.
Well, that's a good point. How does it all affect them? That's what they want to know. I don't
Yeah.
care who you're dating. How does this affect me?
Yeah, right. What does it mean for me? I think one of the things that we did early on that I think can be helpful as far as if I were going to throw out some suggestions. My kids are athletes, so there were always like a bazillion
Sure.
games.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect opportunities to have someone come. It's around them. It's centered on what they're doing. It's kind of a benign public way, and it's you get to spend a little bit of time with them, but the kid doesn't. Your child doesn't even know because they're so busy involved in their own sport. So that to me was a really those games early on were kind of gifts as opportunities to begin a little bit of integration
And
without
have
it
the
being
first
too
meeting be a
much.
sleepover. People,
Oh God.
come on. What are you doing? Don't be.
Ugh.
What?
I mean, the first sleepover is bad enough. I mean, to do it together, oh God, to do it the first meet, that's relationship suicide.
Well, not only is it relationship suicide, and we could do a whole nother series on this. The message it sends to your kids,
Ugh.
people, come on. You're smarter than
I
that.
did have a mishap. If you want to hear a story, if anybody out there wants to hear a story, I was the girl who occasionally, when my kids were young, um, after they would go to sleep and I was dating someone, I'd have them come over to like hang out.
Hmm.
Now, despite popular belief out there, it wasn't so that we could have sex with my kids in the house. That was not it because that petrified me.
Okay.
But one night I did have someone over, and this was a couple of years before Drew, and we were watching a movie and we fell asleep, just sitting on the couch.
Right.
And my kids woke up, as
Bam.
kids do. Bam! Oh man. Well, let me just tell you, my youngest went into my oldest room and was like, "Oh my God, the lights are on. Mommy's not in her bed." And they came downstairs together, and it was really a horrible, awful, like to this day, I'm not kidding. My son, who's 15, continues to talk about how traumatized he is by me
Final
having sex
thoughts.
on the couch in front of him. Final thoughts are patience. There has to be a level of patience here. And I have to say, Kyle, we didn't really talk about it, but the first meeting is not necessarily always an indicator of what's yet to come. Because our first introductions were really great, and then we hit some really rough spots. after that. So, it's not like, oh, gee, great, we all had lunch. Now we're a family. It's that. Now we're the Brady's. It's not like that. It just doesn't work that way. It's just an introduction. It's a beginning. And so, to your point, it's like a first impression. It is a first impression. So it's got to be one that you do think through and prepare for. I think that the preparation is essential.
Prepare your
like
kids in advance, especially the older kids.
Okay?
Yeah. Listen, we're going to meet such and such. It's no big deal. We're not getting married. I'm not engaged. Nothing's going to change, but I am seeing this person, and he really or she really wants to meet you guys, and I want you to meet them too. So prepare them, give them like a week, 2 weeks, even 2 weeks. I mean, it's, and talk about it. Next, use common sense, all right? It's not a sleepover, okay? You're not going to go, down to the beach for the weekend together. Keep it light, keep it, just inconsequential. It's no big deal. You're going to meet them. Keep it brief. I still believe, listen, I don't think the first meeting, personally, and I'm not criticizing what anybody else does, but I don't think the first meeting should be more an hour at all. Lunch, fine. Ball game, great. Hour, I'm done. Right? And then lastly, just keep it, I think, in a public place. The ballpark is a perfect example. You can't go wrong there. You just can't go wrong there. That's just a win for everybody. And then you kind of ease into it from there. Maybe the next time then it is dinner. I mean, once you've opened that door to the initial introduction, then you can go all kinds of directions from there.
And I will add, my final thought is it's important. I never did this. I still don't. I don't force a relationship to happen. Don't force them to sit, and why don't you show him your, car collection, or show her your, sometimes it's like when you go to a dog park, I guess, with the dog, when you have a dog and you let them kind of go off and play, and then things happen, whatever happens. I think you also have to give people an opportunity to just kind of, find their way, find their space, and just try to relax through it.
We're going to give you the final word tonight because you used the dog park analogy. Laura, have a great week. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
See ya.